Welcome to Fearless Females, where ambition meets resilience. Meet your guide, Lorie Jones, president of Fidelis Wealth Advisors. Join her and remarkable women executives as they uncover the triumphs and transformative moments shaping extraordinary careers. Ready to be fearless? Let the journey begin.
Welcome to Fearless Females. Thanks so much for joining us this morning. I'm super excited. We're talking to Shriya Josephsen today. And the part I liked the most about our interview was her perspective on making sure that you're taking time to invest in yourself, to make sure that you are in the path you want to go down, that you're in the place you want to be, and that you are still the person and heading towards the direction of the person that you want to become. So I'm super excited to listen to this. Thanks so much for joining us. Let's get started. Good morning. We're here today with Shriya Josephsen. She is the Group Vice President of Business Transformation for Huge, which is a company. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Lorie. I am so excited to be here. This is my very first podcast. I'm a little bit nervous, but, excited for our hour together. So thank you.
You'll do great. It's all about you. And I can tell how great you are already. So we'll be fine. You'll be great. So my very first question is always, I'm a reader. I love reading. I've got a huge stack of books that just keeps getting bigger, honestly, because I can't read them fast enough. But what is your favorite book?
That's a great question. And I would say in the world of podcasts that we live today, it's always still fun to pick up a book and read it. I used to be a very avid reader when I was younger, before kids. So I will give you some suggestions that might be a little bit older, but I still think they're applicable. And I've started to pick back up on reading again. So I'll share some of the books that I'm reading now. So my all-time favorite from a nonfiction perspective is Good to Great by Jim Collins. It's a great book. If you're in business, if you are learning about business, starting to get there, if you're leading a company, it's got great principles, very easy to read. I've read that a couple times, and someone suggested it to me once, since it's always on my table. My all-time favorite fiction, actually I have two of them. One is The Nightingale. Mm-hmm. It's a great book about World War and two sisters and their story, their passion, survival, grit. So lots of just hard stuff to read, but a great engaging book. The other one is a more recent one that I read, and that's called Lessons in Chemistry. That's super vibrant. It's by Bonnie Grimm's. It is a very fast read. If you're passionate about rowing, if you're passionate about chemistry, it's a super fun read. They actually made an HBO series about it, or an Apple TV series about it. One of the two, I can't remember which one, which I've not watched because I love the book so much and I don't want it to be tainted by the show. So those are some of my favorite books I've read. And most recently, I just started reading Courage is Calling by Ryan Holiday. So we'll see how that one is. That's the most recent one I just started.
Well, good. Thank you for those suggestions. I love it. For being, you say I don't read very much anymore. Honestly, that's like 3 or 4 suggestions right there. So I'm kind of embarrassed. I say I'm an avid reader and I don't have 3 or 4 suggestions that I'm going through. So thanks so much for that. Tell me a little bit about your journey. How did you get where you are today? What do you do? Just talk to us a little bit about how you got to where you're at.
Yes, would love to share my journey. It's a little bit long and a little bit complicated, so I'm going to break it down. So my journey actually starts in India. I was born in a town called Amritsar, which is about 8 hours north of Delhi. And I lived there until I was about 17. So grew up there most of my life. And then at the age of 17, my parents, a little bit planned, but mostly unplanned, decided to move to Chicago. So we moved. The entire family moved, packed our bags, and we were in Chicago when I was 17 as a senior in high school. Our trip was planned. Our stay was not planned. So I found myself starting high school in a new world, in a new culture, in a new system. And I would say that year was probably one of the hardest years of my life. As you can imagine, as a senior in high school, you're leaving your friends behind, you're leaving everything behind to start brand new. While it was a tough year, it was a great learning experience. And I ended up turning that adversity that was faced into an opportunity later on. Finished high school in Oak Park River Forest in Illinois, and ended up going to University of Iowa for my undergrad. I will say the reason I was there was because it was the only college that would accept me that late in the game. But I could not be more thankful to the University of Iowa for taking my application, trusting me and letting me be part of their journey. So I studied undergrad. I was there for finance and management as my business degree. And I had a wonderful experience, loved the state of Iowa. After that, I started my business journey, my professional journey with GE. So my journey in the past 17 years has been GE, so General Electric, to then NBC Universal, which was owned by GE at that point. And I helped in the sale of GE and NBC Universal and Comcast. From there, I went to Deloitte, who reached out to me asking me to join their strategy and operations practice. So I was with them for over a decade. I left Deloitte for a couple of years to go get my MBA at UT Austin. So I moved to Austin from New York. I went back to Deloitte for a couple of years and, had a wonderful time at Deloitte, loved the experience, learned so much. And then most recently, the past 2 years or so, I've been with my current company, Huge, as their group vice president of business transformation. And I am more than thankful to all of the different companies and the experiences I've had and really how I got there and got where I am today because of it. So that's a lot in a nutshell, but that's a little bit about myself and kind of how I got here.
That's a really cool story. I love to hear a little bit more about an unplanned move to the United States at age 17.
It's something I think about quite a bit now that I'm older. So at 17, my parents decided to come to the US because my dad's brother's son was graduating from Georgetown. And we had applied for tourist visa just like any other family would. The United States basically rejected our application and they said, you have green card application in process. You cannot apply for it. It kind of surprised my dad because he had applied for that almost 17, 18 years ago. So when I was born, and he was like, I forgot about it. I thought you forgot about it. So how are we here 17 years later talking about this application? Well, it just so happened that it got lost in the shuffle. They looked at it. They were like, you're a family of 4. We're not sure why we didn't approve you. It seems like it was a mistake. You've been approved. So miraculously, 17 years later, I had my parents had their application approved. So we came to the US knowing that we had green cards in progress. But we had already planned this trip. We were going to go check out the US, check out a couple of states. We had never been here. Well, 2 weeks into our vacation, so-called vacation, my dad decided that, and my mom decided that it was going to be really hard to go back and forth because once you're green card citizens, you really have to come back to the US every year to maintain your residency. And it was going to be really hard financially to do that. So they decided by talking with other family members that we were just going to stay. So we never went back. I came with one suitcase and that became my sort of closet for the moment. We came here August of 2002. So school had already started. So I was already a month behind when I joined high school. So not only was I new to high school, I was a month behind. I had to pick up classes. It was my graduating year. I had to do the requirements. Luckily, I spoke English because that's a question I get asked a lot. But I will say the accent was what I practiced that year because I had nothing else to do. I didn't know a lot of people. So I was like, hey, I'm just going to do this. Why not? And that was it. That was the story of how we ended up here. My parents, starting a new life on their own, which was very hard for them. All about really taught me about resilience and that you can really overcome whatever situation you're in, no matter what it is, if you just keep looking forward and moving forward. So it was a very interesting time for our family. But I will say, looking back, things happen for a reason. It just so happened to be a tough time, but we've come a long ways and we all turned it into an opportunity for ourselves.
It's really funny. I've got a few kids and I think they would think like, I don't know, and not getting an invitation to the prom, or currently my daughter's car needs a new clutch and it's been down for like 2 weeks. Like that is the worst thing that could possibly happen in your life. And you
Right.
moved and a whole new culture, a whole new country, and assimilated and got to college. And what a testament, how brave that is, how fearless.
Thank you. No, I appreciate you saying that. It didn't seem that way at the time when I was 17. I was very angry, but I would say yes. Over time, I've learned to realize that that was an opportunity for me. So instead of just complaining about it or being upset that I was here, I left all my friends behind. I turned around. I was like, I should look at this as an opportunity. This is going to open so many doors for me if I wanted to. And I should see what I can do about it and where I can take it. So yeah. Appreciate you saying that.
What is the best investment that you've made in yourself, Shriya? Is there something that you can kind of look back on and you're like, oh my goodness, if I hadn't done that, I just wouldn't be where I'm at today? Is there something you can think of?
So let me talk to you about an example of a turning point that I had very early on in my career. I would say that was probably how I started my career. So I was a sophomore at the University of Iowa, studying finance and management. I had done a lot of odd jobs, mainly because I wanted to work. I wanted to earn money. So I had worked at a restaurant. I was a server. I sold bonsai trees. I filed insurance claims. So you can just think about any job. And I was like, I will raise my hand and do it for the experience and for the money. But I obviously, as a sophomore, needed to apply for jobs for an internship. So I went ahead looking at the job forum. I applied for a number of jobs. There were a few that I didn't meet the criteria for. And unfortunately, I couldn't get in and couldn't get an interview. Well, one of them so happened to be General Electric, or GE's summer program, which was part of their financial management program, so FMP. If you know anything about that program, it's a leadership program that's over 100 years old. So it's fairly renowned. People know about it. And they were recruiting at the University of Iowa. Well, I really wanted to apply and I couldn't. Well, it so happens that somebody dropped out and they had a slot available. So we all got an email the night before saying, we have one slot available. Does anybody want to sign up? And I obviously jumped on it. So I signed up, I got the interview, and I realized it was for the very next day at 8:30 in the morning. So as a sophomore in college, you can imagine you're like, crap, how am I going to do this? So I studied, I prepared, did the best I could, showed up. And I did get the offer. I did get the summer internship. It obviously went well. I was the only one from the University of Iowa to get an internship with GE, specifically for the financial management program that summer. And I would say that for me was not only a pivotal moment, but it was a turning point because it started me on this career trajectory that has led me to my job today and to be the leader I am today. And I didn't know what I was really signing up, because you really don't know when you're 19, 20 what the job is going to entail. But you were like, it sounds really exciting. I'm going to be in Stamford, Connecticut for the summer. This is so cool. It was so eye-opening. It was wonderful to have that experience. And I will say since then, one of the lessons I learned and have continued to work on is making small investments in myself, whether it's professionally or personally, making sure that I'm taking risks. I'm continuing to move forward, whether it's finding the right mentors, whether it's raising your hand for a job, whether it's taking a risk and applying for something you don't think you qualify for, taking a role that nobody else wants, whatever it is, doing that is really valuable, because you never know what door is going to open for you and where it's going to lead you. And had I not done that, I have no idea when my journey would be, but I don't know if I would be here. So I owe a lot for me to be like, I may not be qualified. I'm just going to try it and see what happens.
I think that's a really interesting idea too. I feel like the worst they can say is no. Like, what's the worst that can happen, right? They're not going to take away your birthday. They're not going to do anything. So the worst they can say is no. Just try. I love that you were that. And maybe some of the fact that you had such a exciting experience at 17, 18, prepared you to be willing to take those risks.
Yeah, it definitely helped, probably. It's like, well, what's the worst they can do? I mean, they can't send me somewhere else I don't want to go. So
what about the worst advice that someone gave you? Can you think of a time that you got some really bad advice, and did you take the advice or did you not take it? What did you learn?
This is a very interesting question. I don't know if I have a specific advice to share, but what I will say as a girl, as a woman now raised in India, you are raised with a very different mindset that society has set for you. And I think women in general, it applies universally. We are always told to get approval. You have to get approval from your family. You have to get approval from your teachers. You have to get approval from the people you work with. And that is something that was really part of my DNA as I was growing up. Couldn't really do without talking to 5, 10 different people. And breaking that has been really hard. Is making a decision without having to get advice from someone has been really hard. And I've made it very intentional more recently in my life to do that. But when I was younger, especially when I was first moved to the US, that was one of those things where I was like, everybody has to agree before I do this. So I would say it's one of those things where what I've learned over time is you can make your own decisions. What's the worst that's going to happen? Either you don't do it or you do it. So knowing that people are going to tell you certain things and you might disagree, or people are going to say that this is what society expects of you, and it's up to you to decide, well, that's cool for them, but I'm just going to go about doing it the way I want to do it. It makes a big difference, but you don't realize that until you're older and you've been through life a little bit. So I wish, that was something I did earlier on, but I obviously am still learning. It's still part of my DNA, so it's still hard to get rid of it. I still think of it at times, getting approval, consensus, not all the time, but it's still there. So I would say that would be maybe not the worst advice, but a big part of upbringing and just professional and personal journey is being held back because you're looking for approval. You're looking for that acknowledgement from others that you're doing the right thing.
Well, and you can always find a lot of different opinions as to what you should do. And sometimes, I find that those opinions are all biased on one side. And I think that I should be doing this, and everyone else thinks I should be doing this. So do you still ask for the opinions of others, and then you just kind of take it with a grain of salt, so to speak? Or have you gotten to the point where you're like, I can make this decision without asking a bunch of people?
I think it's both. I think I'm getting to the point where I have a gut feeling now where I know what I want to do. Like doing your podcast, it was a little bit of like, I'm going to do it. This is my very first one. It's going to be probably a little bit nerve-wracking, but I'm just going to do it. And then I'm going to share it. But there are times where if I'm making a much bigger decisions, like taking a job or looking to get promoted, I will find my mentors and ask them to guide me. But I try to diversify it. So it's not someone who's always going to be like, absolutely do it. I always try to find multiple opinions so that I can make the right decision that's going to help me succeed longer term and thinking ahead. So I think it really varies. Sometimes I'm like, especially now as a mom of 2 boys, I'm like, there are times where I'm like, I'm just going to do this and we'll ask for forgiveness later. But then there are others where I'm like, I should just ask what people have done and see what people have done and then decide what's best for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I as a mom, I've got 5 kids, but 3 boys. And I hear you right there because I'm like, they don't give you any instruction manuals. They don't tell you what to do. And most of the time you're just basically winging it and hoping you don't mess up. So you're
Yes.
going to do great. They turn out great at the end. I promise you.
So I imagine all your kids are older, all 5 of them.
I do. My youngest just graduated from high school. So I do have older kids. So I've been through the 3 little boys stage where I felt like I probably didn't sleep for months straight. And I bet you have been there.
Yes. Mine are 7 and 4. So I would say I'm coming out of that phase, but it's exhausting with them because they are just go, go, go all the time.
So what about a situation, if you can look back over your journey in your career and you say, oh gosh, if I had known then the same, what I know now, I would have handled that so differently. Is there something you can think of like that?
I don't know if I have anything that I would say I wish I had done differently. What I would say is I wish I had more self-care and self-compassion. We are so hard on ourselves as women. We want to do so many things. We're juggling so many things. We're playing so many roles at the same time. I would say knowing that I can invest time in myself more. That's one thing I would remind myself. I feel like as you get older, you just get better at certain things. And this is one of those things where I take the time now to work out, to read, to go hiking, to do things that I like, to go out, try a new restaurant. You're so busy trying to go from place to place. And even especially when you're raising a family, that having that and time for yourself is just so important. And we lose that over time. And I would say, wish I'd done more of that.
Is it giving yourself permission to spend time on yourself that's hard? Or is it finding the time? Like I I'm not good at this. I was just talking to one of my sisters and I'm like, I'm bad at balance. I don't have any, I'm not great at this. So enlighten me. How do you do that?
I think it's a little bit of both. It's you feel the mom guilt a little bit for spending time on yourself. Like I go out to dinner, I'm like, I should be with my kids. I think you have to realize for me personally, I've realized if I don't do that, if I don't invest time in myself and carve out time, I'm not going to be the best version of myself for my kids or my job, because then I'm doing things for everyone else. Like, when is it time for me? So finding an hour to, I wouldn't say every day, but intentionally finding time has become so important for me.
Mm-hmm.
And it could be time with your friends. It could be time alone. It could be time working out. It's become a part that I've started doing more so very recently, like I would say in the last year. So this is not something that's been going on for a while. In the last year or so, I've realized that if I do it, I'm a happier person. And then everything around me seems a lot easier to manage. Obviously, it's really hard when you have kids nonstop asking for things. But even, I'm okay with them watching TV so I can just have that time to myself. And I think that's okay, that balance and having that boundary and not being too hard. Like, no, I'm always having to do things with them because that's what's expected of me. Because I do think we play so many roles and are expected to do so much, that having those boundaries has helped.
Yeah, I love that idea. And I'm working at getting better at those sorts of things too. But I really think it's important that sometimes as women, and especially as professional women, we just get overwhelmed and we get to the point of burnout before we're willing to stop and adjust and take that time to recharge and fill our own buckets, so to speak. And I love that you have figured out that before you got to the brink of insanity.
Yeah, 100%. I think the other thing I would add is having a good tribe is really important. I found my community that I live in, I found a group of moms, and some of them are working professionals, some of them are stay-at-home moms. And we found each other and we rely on each other for things as well. So going to a birthday party and dropping my kid off to be like, yeah, I'll be back in 2 hours because I need those 2 hours to go for a walk, to run to the store. And having the ability to do that is another way that I find you can really spend time on yourself. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be the break that you are looking for a few minutes to just reset yourself, find your new rhythm, or take a break from something, whatever it may be. I think having that community and tribe has been phenomenal, especially since I've had kids. So that's another thing that I would suggest outside of just finding time for yourself. If you can find people that can help you find time, even better.
Yeah, I think that's a good point too. Like, a lot of times you don't see yourself heading to the burnout phase or to the really too busy and happy phase, and your girlfriends do, and they can say,
yes.
Hey, maybe you just want to take a minute.
Yes, it is true. And if you have some good friends, they will tell you that.
What about if you could go back and talk to your younger self and like 20, 21, 22, like you choose the age, but if you could talk to yourself at the beginning of your journey, what would you tell her?
I would tell her that it's going to be okay, not to be too hard on yourself, that keep moving forward the way you are. I would probably focus on more self-discovery. We, again, as women, we tend to start playing so many roles, whether it's the family role, whether it's the mother role, with the wife role, the caretaker role, the professional role, that a lot of times we forget to recognize who we are as women. And knowing that early on and keeping that, even though you are going to change, is so important. So I would remind myself, if I was 22, like you are great as you are, and you are going to grow and you're going to become a better person. And it's okay to let change happen. But at the same time, don't lose yourself because you're starting to play all these other roles at the same time, and because you want to do so much and society is expecting you to do so much. So continuing to sort of invest yourself and finding time and slowing down when you need to. I was in my 20s, I obviously wanted to make the professional leap. And then later on, when I had my kids, I realized I needed to slow down a little bit because I needed to pause for them, and I couldn't do all of it all the time. So something had to give. And knowing that it's okay to do that because it's a journey that you're on and you will get back on track. Like it may take a little bit longer and that's okay. But it might turn out to be even better than you expected. You know, I'm sure at 20, I thought I wanted to be a C-suite executive by the time I was like early 40s. And hopefully I can still get there. But if it takes a little bit longer, that's okay. You know, having that ability to adjust and be versatile is so important. But you don't realize that when you're 20 because you don't know what life has got ahead for you. And that's something that I've learned over the years too, is just to slow down when needed and learn about yourself and know where your boundaries are and where your limits are.
I think that's a really important point too, to understand that you aren't just, you know, vice president. You aren't just mom. You aren't just wife. You are, you know, Shriya as well. You've got your own unique needs and wants and plan. How do you get in touch with that though? Like how do you sit down and have like I don't know, an interview with yourself and say, hey, where you want to go? Are you heading in this direction and like course correct? Like, how do you do that?
You know, where I've started to do that is I've started to listen to my gut more. I've started to listen to myself more. There are times where I'm asking myself the question of, am I happy doing this? Like, am I happy making this decision? Do I want to do this? Even if it's as simple as friends inviting you to go out for a brunch or a lunch, and you're like, do I really want to go and do that right now? Or do I much rather sit and watch and binge watch a show on Netflix or, you know, a Prime, whatever it may be? I think making some of those very easy decisions and knowing that you are the decision maker and you are the one who controls your destiny and can steer it whichever way you want, even for smaller things like that, I think it's how you do it. It's how you figure out how you're going to invest your time in. Because if you are deciding where all your time goes, you're probably very happy at the end of the day. If everybody else is draining your time and you have nothing for yourself, then you're always constantly trying to fight it. And then you're exhausted at night. You don't get good sleep. You know, one of the things most recently I realized is working out is how I am able to sleep through the night. If I don't work out or break my momentum, I wake up in the middle of the night. And that was a self-discovery for me after not working out for a week or 2 weeks and realizing, I was like, why am I suddenly not feeling great? And it was that. So just doing, you know, self-reflecting a lot, and not about your family around you, the world around you. It's about the one thing you can control, which is you.
Mm-hmm.
And how can you do things differently? And then starting to make that change, because you will see that if you change within you, the things that will make you and do things that will make you happy. I mean, everybody else can do whatever they want. You will look at things differently. And I think that to me has been a lesson that recently became more obvious.
That's really insightful. I like the idea of, and I had another woman on that mentioned the same thing, like you're in charge of your time and you're saying you're in charge of your decisions too. Like check with yourself. And I think if you make those smaller decisions very thoughtfully, like, you know, I want to join this group or go with this friend or do this thing? If you make those smaller decisions very thoughtfully, maybe it makes it easier to make the bigger, more, you know, complex decisions.
100%. You're happier making decisions because you're doing things that you want to do, and even bigger decisions of, do you want to go back to work full time after you have kids? Do you want to take that promotion? Do you want to continue climbing the ladder? Are you happy where you are? Do you want to retire early? All of those decisions in my mind, do you want to add more to your plate? Become easier when you are in a place that mentally you're clear about what you want. And that only happens when you have the time to think about what you really want and what makes you happy.
What scared you the most when you started on your journey? Is there, like, from listening to you, Shriya, I'm not sure anything scared you. moved to a place, started a new thing.
I would say what scares me, and still to this day, is imposter syndrome.
Okay.
I think as women, we all have, probably more so than men, have imposter syndrome, where we are always continuously self-doubting. Do I deserve that comp that I'm getting? Do I deserve the salary I'm getting? Do I deserve the raise I'm getting? Do I deserve the promotion I'm getting? Do I deserve this new position I'm applying for? I mean, going back to when I started even my professional journey, I think that is still something that scares me. And interestingly, Michelle Ashby was the one who I was talking to her about this a couple of weeks ago. And she's the one who told me, she's like, somebody told her that a little bit of imposter syndrome is actually not bad. And I had never thought about it that way, you know, because you're always thinking about things black and white. And what I realized is actually true. Because you are a little bit of self-doubt, it makes you want to work harder. It makes you want to do better. So having a little bit of imposter syndrome is not bad. Now, when I was younger, I'm sure I had a lot of it because I was like, can I even be with these group of people? Like starting my journey with Deloitte, like, yes, Deloitte reached out to me. Yes, they wanted me to come join their finance practice within strategy and operations. But Deloitte has some really qualified, brilliant people, and they hire from the best schools in the country. And I was always like, do I meet that criteria? Am I qualified to be here? I mean, I was with Deloitte for 13 years. So clearly I was, but continue to question myself over and over again. So I think that's the part that still scares me. So I have to keep that in balance. And I would say for people that are starting out, raise your hand when you see something that you don't think you're qualified for because of the imposter syndrome. And go for it. You might learn it a lot faster than you realize, and you might be more qualified than you realize. But having that self-doubt is not the worst. Just knowing how you can overcome it is probably what has kept me going, I would say.
And so how do you overcome it? Like you try it anyway and you've been successful and that's worked. But when you're trying it, when you're to the point where, oh, I'm not sure I'm good enough, is it just fearlessness? Like, how do you?
So a little bit of overconfidence, hopefully, yes. But I think it's also having that tribe, having the mentors and people that can give you the confidence and the support of, no, you are amazing. You're fearless. You can absolutely do this. Like, look at all that you've accomplished. Look at everything you've done. Finding those people and surrounding yourself with them. So when you do have that self-doubt, even a little bit, and you can trust them to share it with them and for them to be like, no, I don't see it that way. I see it this way. And this is what you've done. Because you are going to have moments of self-doubt. You are going to make decisions that are going to be wrong. That's the only way you learn. Hopefully they're not big decisions. They're small decisions. And that's really how you self-correct and you move past where you think you are with imposter syndrome, because a lot of the times others don't have it, or others have it, they just don't share it. And I would say men tend to be really good about hiding imposter syndrome more than women do. So even having men mentors is great, because they will give you confidence and support you that sometimes, you maybe not be able to find with other women. And so diversifying that way that's what I found helpful. Is some of the mentors that I had at Deloitte, some of the partners there were so keen in helping make sure that I was able to move on, giving me the confidence you can absolutely do it. And having that is also, I think that's probably the best way to get past it.
Yeah, that's great. That's really, a great idea to think about that, about finding the tribe that will support and help and push and give you the confidence to try.
Yes, 100%.
What about any unique challenges coming up, through the ranks along your journey as a woman? Did you face anything unique because you were female?
Yes, that's a great question. So I'll throw in something more for my story for you. So one of the hardest years, other than when I was 17, was when I had to raise my son alone. So I raised my older son, who's now 7, for the first 16 months of his life all by myself. I lived in Austin. I had a full-time job that I didn't want to stop working. My parents lived in Chicago. They even asked me to move there. And I was like, nope, I'm going to do it here. And the reason was my husband at that time, now ex-husband, was getting deployed with the Texas National Guard to Somalia. And so he was leaving 3 days after our son was born. And I was probably not prepared for motherhood, because I just raised my hand and I was like, how hard can it be? Well, motherhood is the hardest job. A newborn is a whole nother ballgame. So I found myself in a situation where I was like, all right, I signed up for this. This is absolutely impossible, but I have to do it because I have a newborn to take care of and raise. That was a challenge in itself. Obviously, I survived it. I don't know how I survived it, but I survived it. And I came a lot stronger on the other side. And I think a lot of since then, what I've talked about on this podcast so far, what I've become is probably for that reason, the resilience and the grit and all of that has really just, I think, pulled together for me and helped me get through that those 16 months. But I would also say that having a great support system, so, obviously my friends around me, family when I needed them, but then having an employer that was willing to let me come back, but being flexible. So if I needed to go do daycare pickup, if I needed to take care of a sick newborn, which happens all the time, if I needed to wake up and take them to the doctor, all of those things they were okay with. But it was a long 16 months, a lot of weekends, raising a newborn by myself, a lot of long days and nights. I would say that was a very challenging year. And that's when I realized I needed to kind of take a step back from my career. I needed to focus on just this. And I would say at that time is when I really lost myself too, right? Because you don't have time for yourself. That's when self-care, self-compassion just go out the door, because how are you going to even think about it? And you find yourself in a very difficult place at the end of, I found myself in a very difficult place at the end of it. And I think that's where some of this self-reflection took place. And I realized if I want to be successful, if I want to be better and happy, I need to change things, both about myself and the situation around me. So it was an awakening, but it was a very interesting, challenging time. It's probably the one thing I'm the most proud of as well in my life, I would say, even more so than the moving here at the age of 17. And he's wonderful. He's turned out to be great. He's a great 7-year-old. So yeah.
Yeah, I know. It hits you like a ton of bricks when they put that little baby in. And yeah, sometimes I'm not sure any of us as parents and probably others can back me up. Like, none of us know what we're getting into. We all raise our hands and we're like, sure, how hard can it be? And then we figure out how hard it can be.
Really hard. Like the sleepless nights, figuring out whether you're pumping, you're breastfeeding, you're formula feeding, among all the other things, recovering. Like I ended up having a C-section with him. So recovering myself in it, that goes out the window. You're like, what, me? I don't need any time for me. How do I do all of the other things I'm supposed to do as a mother? So I think that did not know what I was signing myself up for, but it got a very quick lesson in it.
It sounds like your company was really supportive though during that time. And that was early on, before, the on-site daycares and the maternity leave or paternity leave, family leave act even was born. So that's nice that the company had those already.
Yes. Yeah, my company, Deloitte at that time, I was one of the early ones that was starting to give, 4.5, 5 months, and then you could add additional time on it. So having that and having very supportive people at the company itself, being like, hey, it's okay if you need to do it. If you need to step away, it's okay if you can't make that, but not penalizing me for it, right? Definitely slowing down my career because obviously I'm not doing as much work, which is expected of them, but not penalizing me for it. I think it was a big part. It was a big relief for the time I was going through. So yes.
That's great. Shriya, you kind of alluded to this before, but can you tell us what is the thing you're most proud of?
I would say yes. So surviving those 16 months is what I'm most proud of. But I would add to that is, coming out of that, I had my second, he's now 4. At the end of those 4 years, which was a COVID baby, so that was a whole nother challenge in itself. Coming out of all of this, I had to really step back and focus on who I wanted to be in the next 10 years, 15 years of my life. And I had to reflect on things that had happened. And in doing so, I decided to make a change. My husband and I separated at that time. We've been separated for a few years. We have a great relationship. We are great co-parents to our kids. We help each other out where we need it. We support each other. So it's been great, but really proud of obviously surviving all of these moments in my life, but then at the same time, making sure that I have my goal in mind and where I want to get to, and having that to look forward to, and making myself more and more valuable as I move forward in my life, and not just looking at the things that happened and pausing and being like, this is it, I can't do it anymore. I think that is what makes me proud of myself, is that I have the ability to continue to move forward despite all the things that life throws at you, and you just never know what it's going to throw at you, is something that, I'm really proud of. And I'm very proud of who I am today. And I don't think I would have gone there had some of these things not happened to me and what I did about it. So
Yeah, that sense of grit of just getting through and coming out on the other side with not only intact, but better for having gone through the experience. That's an accomplishment.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Any advice for a young woman who's just starting down this path that you've been so successful at to help her?
For women starting, or young women starting, I would say, a few things. One, have grit in whatever you're passionate, both personally and professionally. Try and be resilient. Life is going to be hard. And those are the moments you're going to learn the most. You're going to learn who you are in those moments. Continue to invest in yourself. Find yourself to be more valuable as you go on this journey. It is a long journey. So don't get defeated if you do something and it doesn't turn out to be your way. Find another way to go around, and maybe you'll end up doing something differently that will be even more valuable. And I will also say, lastly, just go for it. Apply for that job, go for the promotion, go talk to that person, network with that person that you've been wanting to. Take some risks, because you just never know what opportunity will end up opening up that door for you and where you end up going from there. So some of those things are things that I've learned that I've done, whether that was intentional or not, and it's paid off. And I continue to keep that in mind as I move forward. So having that in the back of your mind is great. And then obviously find time for yourself.
I love that. That's the one I'm working on. I always take something out of these interviews to I'm like, okay, that's the thing I'm going to try to do better at. That's the thing I'm putting on my list to work on. And I love that idea of self-reflection that we've talked about today, and kind of checking in with yourself and trying to see if you're still on the path that you want to be on, or if you need to adjust. So I really appreciate your time today, Shriya, and I appreciate all your insights. If I have a young lady listening to this that wants to get in touch with you, how does she do that?
Oh, absolutely. Well, she can reach out to me on LinkedIn. So if she just looks up Shriya Josephsen, she can find me on LinkedIn. But I'm also happy to share my email, which is just my firstname.lastname@gmail.com. So hopefully that's fairly easy to find.
Well, perfect. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you joining us and sharing your journey.
Thank you.